played before Toronto scored a run.
God, I don't know. I mean, but at that point, the Dodgers were running out of pitchers. I was looking over. I was like, all right, they gotta start warming up Sandy Koufax at this point. They got no one left.
I get all these stuff today, like, well, why did they take this guy out? Why did they take that hitter out? Well, I don't think neither manager thought they were going to be playing 18 innings. Okay,
No.
you go for why didn't and if he doesn't, those type of games, they seemed a little out of. You're not used to managing a game with regular rules. Could you tell
Yeah.
last night? I mean, they
It,
should. The guys
yeah.
are managing those games where there's not a ghost runner at second. It's a different game. Could you imagine football or basketball that you played a different set of rules in overtime?
And that's just kind of flabbergasting to me because you'd think you'd expect it, but the way that your brain works is like there are certain like channels and you repeat the same thing over and over again, and then suddenly those channels get completely rewired because the rules are different.
That's a great deep answer, Laura, to a simple question. I don't know why they don't just. I don't know. I've got some personal thoughts on it because it used to be how you manage your pitching staff and your roster was a skill that a manager, a pitching coach, and a general manager had to bring. And now they're just shuffling 30 or 40 players, it seems like, back and forth every year. Someone sent me the other day in 80 something, we had 13 pitchers all year. All year. I really believe if they would decrease the number of pitchers that you're allowed to carry, you'd have less injuries.
I,
Because, yeah, I really do. What, Laura? I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say I think so because it's also, I mean, just to get into the nitty-gritty of it, like you look at how even the Mets had to manage their pitching staff. So many of these things, I'm like, okay, this is an inordinate number of injuries. And at a certain point, it's not just bad luck. There has to be a reason for it when it comes to these arms getting hurt.
Well, sometimes I don't understand why just ownership in general. At any point do they go, "Hey, listen, we're spending all this money on whether it's a pitching lab or this and that and whatever. Tell me what I've got to show for this because we just led the world in injuries, so
Right.
Mm.
and we're struggling to acquire pitching. So, what are we getting for all this expenditure? Like, show me on paper." Or is it helping us evaluate the draft because we're not getting any pitching out of the draft? Is it helping us uh, shape pitches and do all this other stuff. There's cause and effect for everything. You might want to do this, but what effect is it having on people?
Yeah,
But
is it information overload?
well, that's another. The guys call me. I think it's a different dynamic in the locker room. One of the first things I always do when I go into a place is get everybody out of the locker room except the players. We had 26 back then. It was 25 players in the locker room because Laura and Cole, there's so few places where players can drop their guard and be themselves and become, you know, teammates and form a culture, so to speak. And it's travel, it's the dining room, it's the locker room until about 3:34, and then you have to kind of, do the other part of it. But I just the more times teams can drop their hair and feel safe around each other, and now we've got so many people in these guys' ears from day to day. And I think the job of being a major league coach is harder than it's ever been. I really do. One, there's so many of them, and everybody's trying to carve out a niche of, I'm the director of left-handed sliders in the dirt.
Yeah, like
I'm the coordinator of bat handles, whatever. It's, but sometimes,
no, it's like you're right. It's like it feels like everybody needs a guru. Everybody needs like all these various like factors going in there. But like sometimes when I look at these things, because you've reached kind of a point of maximum saturation. You have these guys who are throwing 100 miles an hour, their arms get blown out, or you have all these hidden gurus and pitching labs, but then suddenly guys are getting hurt or swings are getting messed up. At one point, do you think baseball ever goes back to the mean where it's like, hey, maybe these guys who throw a little bit slower but kind of know how to pitch instead of throw and stay healthy, or maybe these guys who don't need all this outside help, will that ever become a trend again?
going back to what we said earlier is that one of the problems, a lot of these guys have their own personal hitting coach and pitching coach away from the field.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll fly them in and out, and you don't know what they've been doing with this guy. And then poor Eric Chavez or Jeremy Barnes. Wait a minute, what are you doing? Why is your leg in there? Why are your hands there? So I used to go, listen, this guy's got a personal coach. We're going to work with him. We just need to know what's going on. Because all of a sudden, a grip or a shape of a pitch, and you go, Where did that come from? Well, my personal pitching coach or hitting coach is working with me. To answer your other question, you think it'll go back? It all depends on the leadership in the front offices. The game, there's a different leadership in front offices nowadays. Not saying it's good or bad. It's just, they have to quantify everything, and I understand it. And heck, we were doing numbers and analytics and all this stuff back in the early 90s. This isn't something new. On base percentage, it's just we have so much more information and ways to disperse it. But there's still such a heartbeat in a locker room and in a game. Um, I don't even think coaches and managers are really involved in player evaluation much anymore and player procurement. And it's good and bad, but I think the job description of a manager has vastly changed, Laura. I do. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the questions coming into this that I kind of wanted to ask you, how you do feel the role of the manager has changed. Because, like every time now, like a manager makes a bullpen decision or he decides to make a late game substitution, you get the people on Twitter going, well, was that really him? Or was he getting a call from the front office? Or, how much autonomy do you think these guys are getting?
It's like I've had two or three guys who are interviewing for jobs call me, and I was talking to one yesterday that's got to make a decision whether to take the job or not. And he asked me to give me three questions to ask them. I said, "There's a nice way to interview them, as because he doesn't need the job, but he would like to get into." And I've talked to other people. So you need to ask them how they define what they want their manager to be. Describe the manager, the ideal manager. And then, you should ask them whether you're involved in any player evaluation or procurement. You should ask them about the lineup card because once players know you have no input on the lineup, you might as well pack your bags and go home because you've got in the locker room. It's so hard to have any sense of order there. But I think let them tell you what they define as a good manager. Here's what we want from this manager. We can't do what you do. So when the teleprompter breaks down in the locker room and the script doesn't follow anymore, like who saw that script coming last night? You got to be able to think on your feet. And we had pregame meetings going over who was healthy and who wasn't back in the 90s. It isn't something new where you're scripting out what you'd like for to happen, but the baseball gods don't always let it. We had this thing called a long reliever, Laura,
I remember those.
that was so important to a team. The ability to pick a backup catcher, utility infielder, a fourth outfielder, a long reliever. Those are the guys that allow you to sustain consistency. And nowadays, the long reliever is somebody that's down in Syracuse and they go get him. We wouldn't be able to option guys. We had a guy in Baltimore named TJ McFarland was as valuable as anybody we had. This guy would walk in a third or fourth inning, somebody spit the bit, and he would pitch 3 or 4 innings. And it may not be beautiful, but he didn't cough it up. He took the ball, he threw it over the plate, he got us out of there and allowed us to win the next 2 games. But those guys, and we used to look at a team and go, wow, this guy would be a great long reliever. This guy would be a great, and now they go, what do you mean? But they're valuable. And if you don't have one, you're playing musical chairs with your AAA team every other day.
Innings eaters, right?
I do remember, I always used to say growing up, which was the weirdest thing, my two favorite positions in baseball are catcher and middle reliever. And people would be like, why?
I'm gonna tell you what, try operating the big leagues without one. The backup catcher, because you're playing a sport that people are going to go down, and the level of play that you can sustain while you're not playing it at full throttle. I mean, we played in the playoffs in 14. Machado was out for the year, Chris Davis was out for the year, and Wieters was out for the year. Well, they didn't stop and go, okay, it's okay, we'll wait for you guys to get healthy. No, we had to go get Nick Hundley, we had to play Ryan Flaherty, and we had to go get Steve Pearce.
Yeah.
And nobody, and maintain a level of play. And there's an excuse around every corner. There really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about coaching, or we have been talking about coaching. The Mets are dealing with kind of a coaching shakeup right now in their staff. How is that challenging to navigate? Like, if you're the last man standing, and then next thing you know, you don't have your first base coach or your third base coach, then what?
What do you mean, Cole? Last man standing? Are you talking about you're a coach?
Yeah.
Yeah, for Mendoza, or you're the one guy that's left, and then the coaches around you are gone. Is that difficult?
I like Carlos. I like his presentation. I love his path. I look at guys that are trying to get jobs or whatever, I look at their path, and it usually tells you whether they're equipped to at what's coming. But that's I'm careful about talking about things I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I've talked to some of the coaches that got let go. We talked, and I'm trying to stay positive. And the last thing you want to do is be a negative about everything. But and they'll land on their feet. They're good baseball people, but it's a cold, cruel world. And the coaching job is not as attractive as it used to be. Let's face it, the salaries you're not even breaking even in New York City.
Yeah.
And they're there for the pension time and sometimes the license money. But now with these new agreements coming up, you don't know what it's going to be. So you see, I think someone told me the other day the average salary of an assistant coach and a manager in a top 20 college baseball program is more than a manager and an assistant coaches in the big leagues now.
Hmm.
They made the jobs in college more attractive, and they're playing 50 or 60 games. That's why, if I was going to tell Tony Vitello, the biggest challenge he's going to have is playing 200 games counting spring training as opposed to 50. It's a year-round job, but he'll do fine. He's good.
I mean, in terms of you, with the way that the landscape has changed, would you ever want to manage again, or do you feel like that chapter of your life is done?
I don't overanalyze it, Laura. I know it's hard to believe. I get up, I wasn't looking necessarily with the Mets last time, and we'll see where life takes us. I don't try to make too many plans. I hope nobody loses their job. You can see how long it's taken them to fill a lot of these positions. I don't know if that tells you how unimportant they think the job is or how hard it is to find somebody that fits their criteria. I don't know. But I never say never, but I'm not sitting here twiddling my thumbs, worrying about it. I've been greatly honored to do the things I've done. And, as you get older, you just want to impact some people's lives and try to give them some shortcuts and don't let them step on their tail like you did, like I did, like we all did.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, you're looking back, do you get to the point where you get to reflect back on your career? Do you have a favorite moment? Is there stuff that you kind of like hold dear to?
Yeah, I'm sure. I've been asked a lot about writing a book, and my kids have been pushing me. But the book that they want to write me to write, I think it would reflect. I don't want to reflect poorly on anybody. I don't want to be. It's life's too short. Some of these books, you've got a lot of private things you're exposed to. You don't need to be talking about. And always, when something happens in a game, there's so many things going on that you don't know about. We don't know about behind the scenes. I mean, I had a player with the Mets whose cat died, and he couldn't pitch that night. And I couldn't. After the game, I had to wear it. I mean, you look up the job description of a manager, it should say in the Webster Dictionary, wear it.
Yeah.
So many things you just wear. You could tell all these truths that hurt innocent people and make yourself look better, but it's just not worth it. It's not your job description. But the meat and potatoes of the job is still the same.
Yeah.
It's about relationships. It's about being able to look at the big picture and earn the trust of the players. I've talked to some guys. I don't let them get negative when I hear from guys, whether it be anywhere where I've been. I don't let them go down that negative road of,
Yeah.
well, woe is me. The ideal situation is when you got a locker room where they go to somebody for a pity party and they go, well, wait a minute, he didn't want to hear it. Wait a minute, he didn't want to hear it. Wait a minute, hey, let me talk to Francisco. Wait a minute, he doesn't want to hear it. Let me go talk to Jeff. Oh, he didn't want to hear it. And after a while, you got to look in the mirror. And, a sympathetic ear doesn't play well in the big leagues too much. There's a time and place for it. But I got.
That's actually an interesting thing because I think about the psychology of baseball a lot. How do you balance, like, all right, you got to kind of toughen up. This is a situation where you just have to perform regardless of how you're feeling. But also, that's not the easiest thing in the world to kind of play that mental game with yourself.
But you've done it. I guarantee you both of y'all have posted up on a day where you go, you know what? I always would challenge them. Hey, what do you bring that somebody else can't bring? Here's a opportunity to post up in a situation that's kind of challenging. And I can remember going to the ballpark, fifth starter pitching, they're number one. day game after no sleep with guys, and this is going to be a tough day. And you go back that night and go, wow, what a great game we had. Or you go in with a number one starter and you go home and you go, what happened? Just stay consistent through it all. This is a hard thing to do. That's what I chuckle with football coaches about playing once a week and having an off week. John Harbaugh and I used to kid back and forth in Baltimore. I love John. He's got a grip on reality. I said, John, what'd you do on your off week? He said the most pressure was the game before the off week. Otherwise, you're wearing a bad loss for 2 weeks.
Oh yeah,
awful, awful.
Yeah, baseball's so quick to turn the page. I mean, last night was an 18-inning marathon. How do the Blue Jays bounce back?
I got a question for y'all. I was thinking about this morning. You pitch Ohtani tonight?
I think you kind of have to, right?
After the game that he had physically? And
but what are your other options?
I know. I was thinking somebody said to me I'd pitch him tomorrow night. I go, okay, like you said, Lart, well, who's pitching tonight? That long reliever? The middle reliever?
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing. The bullpens on both these teams are not particularly good. I mean, the best part of their bullpens are these starters that are coming in and are able to kind of like hold the fort.
Yeah.
Somebody was actually saying, and it was kind of like ridiculous to even contemplate. They're like, do you send Ohtani home? Do you take him out of the game after the 14th, 15th inning? And I'm like, no, you don't. But the fact that you even have to ask that question is confounding.
This is a great reason why I never looked at any, whatever y'all call them, Twitter or what else. Go up on anything.
MySpace.
And I'm sure there were some nasty things out there.
Oh, yeah.
But, I remember when I was first started with the Yankees, they would bring a stack of articles in, of all the articles written about the previous game. And after about a week, I said, what am I doing? I got to interact with these people every day. I don't want to read every little word that's being written and said, and I don't want to listen to TV broadcasts and whatever, because my job is those 25 players.
Yeah.
What am I doing? This is not helping. And I would go down to press conferences for the next 20 years and go, okay, tell me what I need to know, because I haven't read anything. I just don't want to be ambushed. Who said what? What's going to be the topic? And I got to tell you, Laura, I'm not blowing smoke, but like I knew when you asked a question, it was thought out. It was the only problem I had with you is you did the homework for a lot of other people. I go, man, they're not going to ask that question. I'm going to get out of here. I was always shocked by what they didn't ask. But I knew at the end, here comes Laura. She's going to ask a question that nobody's thought of. Here we go. But I just wanted to say this to you. You had a way of framing questions that made you want to answer it. I don't know how to put it. You just had it wasn't mean. It was just knowledgeable. It was curiosity. And you were trying to look at the game through what the fans were wanting to know. But I'm telling you, I'd get out of there sometime when you weren't there, and I'd go, I can't believe what they didn't ask. Did they watch the game? I know it's hard sometimes upstairs to actually watch the game, but I always felt like you actually watched the game.
That's very kind of you. No, that's very kind of you and way too kind, but it actually is, because you do miss a lot from actually watching it from the press box.
Yeah.
Because these little things that you can't really see, that you see on the broadcast way, way better, but you're there physically. But it is funny, like you do sometimes, and the number of times where I've left a press conference and I've kicked myself in the butt. I'm like, I cannot believe that I left that question right there, but then so did everybody else. What is wrong with us? And it's kind of a give and take. It's a weird situation day in and day out.
It's a dynamic. I'd love to teach a class for a couple of days to managers and coaches about not trying to spar, but just, being fair. And here's what they're looking for, and here's what you got to bring. I mean, that's another thing Tony's going to have different out in San Francisco. You got to meet with the media twice a day from spring training to the end of the season. It's not, Knoxville. This is a different gig, and someone's going to have to coach him through that, because, you always got to think about the weight your words carry and how they reflect on your organization and your bosses, for that matter.
Right.
You protect an investment by the owner. Okay, whether it's a good or bad investment, who cares? Okay, let's say it's Singa. When you talk about Singa, you got to talk about him like, somebody's writing a check to him. How do you want that asset talked about?
And actually, I always wondered this. I mean, when there were situations, and I'm just talking hypothetically broad, I'm not talking about specific situation, but when there were situations where maybe you didn't necessarily agree with something that's being happened, but obviously it stops with you, so the decision is going to come down as yours. How do you respond to the media, or how do you respond to those questions when not even you agree with what's going on?
Well, you can't win that battle. You're going to lose in the long run. And most of the people are smart enough to figure out what's really going on. But
Yeah.
Lauren Cole, it's not always fair. Anybody thinks that job's going to be fair, it's got some great moments. That's why I always said, hey, this is why I do this. Please let me bask in this. Maybe telling some kid that he made the club. Maybe
Mm.
whatever. Just there's some moments where you go, okay, this is why I want to do this, or I do it. And then the bad moments, you got to suck up and take it. And it's not fair, but it's part of it. And you know, you can get beat up, but you go back in that locker room and you feel refreshed and energized by the energy of the players. You need them as much as they need you, to remind you of why you do what you do. And you just want to make their path easier. It's a nod and catching each other's eye in the dugout when something that we talked about comes to fruition. It's not talking and boisterous stuff. It's just a look that you get with each other that you made a difference in somebody's success, and sometimes their pocketbook.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. Oh,
kind
I
of
was just
that.
gonna say, like, so if you're John Schneider, what do you tell your guys to get them prepared for tonight?
When I first took the Mets job, and I've done this in a lot of places, they had all these inspirational signs like Newt Rockney and Vince Lombardi and who Martin Luther King, God bless him, and all these guys. I mean, they're all everywhere, and they're all sports related statements. But I've never read one of those and went, wow, I'm going to be a better player today because I read that. Most of them are in the weight room. You ever notice that? No pain, no gain.
You
So
miss
I got,
100% of the chance. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
yeah. So we painted over all of them and just put one sign up that said, play better. Play better.
I noticed that. I love that.
Here's the deal. People at home, they're working 9 to 5. They get 1 or 2 vacations a year. They're staying up at night when you're on the West Coast, living and dying with everything you do. They don't want to hear about the hotel had a fire alarm, the
Yeah.
5-star hotel. They want to hear that the food wasn't really good in the clubhouse. I mean, it's a great job, and just play better. I don't want to hear about our pitchings that people are hurt, and it's all part of the reason you're struggling, but they don't want to hear it. So what happens? You can eliminate all the excuses and just go, listen. We can all grab an excuse, and rightfully so. They're probably fair to say, but the people that are out there, the fans, they don't want to hear it. They really don't. Just go play better. That's all. We control it. David Cohn had a great line one night. They booed him off the field in New York, and he had the locker around from my office, and they said something like, David, or do you feel bad about the booze? I mean, is that awful? I mean, right now he goes, not really. He said, I deserved it, number two, but I know they're waiting to embrace me. And it's
Mhm.
up to me to give them something to embrace me. And that's true, especially about New York fans.
Yeah.
They're waiting. They want to stand up and clap for you.
Hmm.
And, a couple starts later, David pitched deep into the game and pitched well, and there's a standing ovation. But he knew that it's on him. It's his responsibility, and he controls it. I tell him all the time, guys, you control this. If you don't like the situation, we can do something about it tonight. Now, some people don't like that in your face accountability, but I stand accused.
But hey, it's New York, and frankly, having grown up here, there's nothing we like more than a redemption arc.
Yeah,
Everyone likes, like sure, fail, go ahead, but the ability to crawl back up is probably what makes a person capable of thriving in New York because you're gonna fail.
yeah. But Cole and Laura, it's all relevant. I mean, whether it's a little league, I mean, your job. If you told the people that were expecting you to have an article on deadline or whatever, deliver something, you go, well, this happened and that happened with this and that, whatever. I ain't with them. It's all relevant, whether it's us at that level where everybody's watching or you behind the scenes. You've had those moments where you just want to know what's the job description? What am I supposed to please here?
Right. So I guess I go in a little bit left field, and I know everyone's worried, thinking about Pete Alonso. You got to know him a lot as one of his players. What was he like? And I mean, whether or not you want to talk about it or not, but what do you think is going to happen with him? Do you think this is the type of guy who becomes a lifelong Met?
Well, I hope so for baseball's sake. I know Pete would like that ideally. I've talked to Pete some, but we try to. I talked to him about the new baby, his family, and just life. I don't, the baseball part of it. I'll leave his
Yeah,
agent. I try to stay out of that because, but Pete's a good human being. Pete's a good teammate. He doesn't take himself too seriously. He's a lot sharper than people give him credit sometimes. He knows the tea leaves, and he's an open book. This guy, when he would come in and plop down and we'd talk about the price of rice in Spain, he went to the University of Florida, and if you understand how he got to where he is, it's a pretty interesting story. Someone's going to get a very consistent guy.
yeah,
They don't ask much anymore, but they used to be a thing where the coaching staff would talk to the front office about who they could trust with a contract.
Hmm.
hmm
Very big, because those guys down there don't miss on it too much. When you're around people that much, who can you trust with that commitment?
yeah.
Like I was talking to Chris Davis years ago in Baltimore, and he was trying to decide between 22 and a half and 23 million. And he asked me one day during BP, I said, Chris, let me ask you a question. How much is enough? How much is enough? Your family and your family's family and your kids' kids. I mean, that takes it all out of the equation. And, where do you want to be? What do you really want to do with your life and this and that, whatever? I said, but how much is enough? So
Hmm.
Pete, at some point, somebody's going to get a consistent post-up player
Yeah.
who you can trust with a contract. Pete's,
Plays the
uh,
162.
he's going to post up. If you tell him he's DHing or not playing, he's very unhappy. Not fun. And he's going to be that same way. Pete's going to, Pete's starting to get into those Hall of Fame numbers now, if you really analyze it.
He
I,
is.
I'd love to see him stay with the Mets. Or I love guys that stay with the team, but I tell you what, I'd be as concerned about losing Edwin Diaz, because if you go out
100.
and start trying to find a closer, life without one is not good. And we used to have to develop our own in Baltimore. Maybe the Mets will take one of those 3 or 4 good young kids and make them a closer. But life without a closer and the market to go get one, most of those guys are on the other side of good, and that's going to be one that I know if I was, from afar looking in, I'm going, what are we doing with Edwin?
Hmm.
I agree. I mean, like, remember 2023? I mean, after his injury,
It was
that
over.
felt like
It
I
was
felt
over.
like that season was.
No, hey, Laura, when I got the phone call from Brandon Nimmo about 9 o'clock or whatever it was, because I was in bed, because I get up at really early, 5 o'clock in spring training. He goes, Skip, you watching this? And I said, what? And he goes, turn it on. I turned it on. I knew our season, I'm not going to say it was over. We were screwed.
Yeah.
That was because we couldn't replace him. And that's when if somebody asks, try going through without one of the best closers in the game. That life ain't good.
Yeah.
Hmm. I love, yeah, when my agent calls me and they're like, "Hey, we got a deal on the line. It's 22 million or 23 million." I can relate to that.
Well,
Um,
Chris, so I told Chris, I said, Chris, I've made $1 million in 1 year, and it's sinful. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I can go to Target or Walmart, and I don't really look at the price tag too much. I go in there, I get what I want, I check out, and I'm gone. I said, I know how much that is. Okay, it's ridiculous. It's like someone said about Steve Cohen. I said, I understand Steve's worth, I think at that time, 16 or 17 billion. I said, you
billion.
understand that's 999 million plus one times 17. To put it in perspective about paying guys and this and that, whatever. It's a
Oh,
different world than we live in. But I know how almost sinful $1 million in a year is.
it's
And,
crazy.
and when these kids are finagling over 22 and a half and 23, it just blows my mind.
It's crazy. So speaking of money and the direction we're going with the CBA, are you worried about
Yeah,
2027?
you got a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got a problem. I hope I'm wrong. And I wish they would sit down with everybody that went through the strike in 94 and 95 and say, talk us out of this, because we would.
Hmm.
That was a low point of my career when Bud Selig came on and said we're canceling the season. and we're sitting there at home. And then we had to go to camp with the replacement players, which was awful. And
Wow.
Replacement players. They got, I remember like Rick Reed and things like that that we call scabbed and everything else.
we got in a lot of trouble with Mr. Steinbrenner. Gene Michael and I sent 2 or 3 guys out of camp because they were too good to be there. And we knew you're going to ruin your whole career if you stay in this camp. One of them was Shane Spencer. I saw Shane not too long ago, and he said, I really thank y'all looking back on and getting me out of camp. We got in so much trouble with Mr. Steinbrenner for that. There were 2 or 3, I think Randy Velarde. We just said, these guys are too good. They're going to play in the big leagues, and they're going to be marked for life.
Yeah.
We got them out. But, this thing that's coming, and I'm not saying one side's right and one side's wrong. They're both right, and they're both, wrong about some things, I think. But I don't like the feel of this right now. There's too many people that are preparing. If you look at the contracts, I mean, heck, the new manager with the Angels, got a 1-year deal?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So if you watch the contracts, you can see they're preparing for it. And I don't like where this is going to end up, I'm afraid.
So there's a thought that if the Dodgers lose the World Series, then there's no problem. It's like, oh, well, any owner could spend the money and see it's not a money problem. But if they win the World Series, then it absolutely is the money problem. We can spend more than anybody. We can defer, have these contracts. Otani's most of his money, well, he's already made a ton in endorsements anyway, but is not coming until 2035.
What do you like? Do you have any doubt? Say they lose in Game 7. Do you have any doubt who will be in the World Series next year from the National League? More than likely. Yeah, I mean,
we're gonna be.
Yeah, it's
one of the bigger problems we have, Cole, is the monopoly they have on the Japanese players, especially the pitchers. That's a
I
problem.
agree completely.
right. Anytime there's a free agent announced, it's like, oh, we just found this new guy in Japan. And it's like, okay, well, I know where he's going to go play.
Okay, so why do they? And 2, how do you fix it? Why is they told me that the good source told me they paid off 3/4 of his contract just from the sales of merchandise and stuff to Japan alone.
Yeah. Laura spoke on that last week, but yeah, it's
opportunities for these guys off the field in LA are so much better than, say, Cincinnati. And until Cincinnati and Pittsburgh and Cleveland have the same
St.
shot,
Louis.
have the same shot at these guys. So what are you talking about? A worldwide draft?
International draft has been floated, I suppose, but
I mean, it feels like
I don't know how you get that done.
Well, that's called a lockout.
Yeah.
Lockout. That's gonna be one of the things. It is, and it's just like you have this name recognition, and suddenly, even the cheaper guys where you just, they're under team control for forever, and they're coming for peanuts, and they can go anywhere they want. They're gonna want to go to the Dodgers. They're not all Shota Imanaga who wants to kind of make his own name with the Cubs or whatever else. So it's a complicated
I
situation.
found out, the pitching over there is so good, but you got to be careful because that's what was unusual about Yamamoto is he was so young. A lot of those guys, by the time you get them, there's some abuse on their arms. Everything over there more is better. They pitch in a lot of times once a week, so you have to make so many adjustments when they come over here, and it takes some foresight to manage them. But I found when I went over there that Ichiro and Matsui were so much better than the next position player. Mm-hmm. Everybody thought they'd get the 3rd or 4th guy and get a nice player. No, the fall off between those guys and position players. But now, and going to Korea and going to these different countries, you realize how different the players were, and you still see it today.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating stuff. Yeah, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. That's all I gotta say about that.
I don't. What's the solution? I mean, do you think? I went through strong union years where these guys you couldn't break them. They were fighting for something. It's going to be interesting to see how the union, I don't want to say stays together, but if that same mentality with this group is the same as the guys back in the 80s and 90s that were really fighting for something that they felt strongly about.
Yeah, and I often consider, everybody looks at baseball players and they all assume that they have the same level of wealth or they all have the same level of financial stability, and that is simply not the case. And that certainly changes the way that you approach negotiations.
You know what I worry about, Laura, is back in the 90s, we didn't get the fans back till 95 or 96.
Yeah.
And it took forever to get them to trust us again. And this one, There's so many things going on in our world and ways for the entertainment and sports and all different things. Some people are going to go, I'm out. I'm out.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Especially if
fulfill
there's no competitive balance. I know everybody loves a villain. I know all this other good stuff, but how many times do you want to see the Dodgers win the World Series before enough is enough?
Yeah, I was kind of well, not hoping, but I like Toronto. But could you imagine a Seattle LA World Series?
I was like, that would be just
Yeah,
the perfect like Cinderella story situation.
it would be apropos to play the whole thing on the West Coast.
Yeah. 9 o'clock start times for everybody in New York.
I,
Laura, any last questions for our special guest here?
I've got so
No.
many things to do.
I
All
have
right, Laura,
one. I have
yeah,
one, Buck.
okay, bring it on. I got to ask you a question.
All right.
Oh, by all means.
Great.
Go ahead.
My final question is cotton or polyester?
I got to tell you, I've gotten more stuff about that through the years. I guess it was a popular episode.
Very.
Yeah.
I
You know,
watched it in preparation.
some background on it. When it first started and he got wind that we were doing this, we filmed that on the West Coast at 8 o'clock in the morning after we played a night game against the Angels. And we're in the auxiliary locker room in that old stadium. And everybody, your eyes are all puffed up from, going to, you had a night game the night before and you're on the
Right.
West Coast. And then Steimer got all upset about it because they were making fun of him on the show, which they didn't tell me before I went on. So we were told not to do that show anymore and got in trouble. But then after a while, he started embracing it because he got a lot of notoriety with it. I think he actually appeared on it or something. But
Yeah, they had like a character of his basically.
I didn't even know anything about the show when I did it. My kids and my wife talked me into it, said it was real popular, and I still get taxed on it every time they show it.
Yeah, how
So
much are those residual checks?
I'm losing money every time they show the show. Trust me. You got to stay in the Actors Guild and all that.
Yeah, oh yeah. I'm in the union. I paid my dues.
No, but the cut, I don't know. I always polyester and that thing was done in one take. I didn't have many lines, but the only time I got in trouble was everybody was laughing at George Costanza. And then what's the crazy guy that pops in the room all the
Oh,
time?
Kramer.
Kramer.
He would crack everybody up too. You could tell how much they loved doing that show because they laughed at each other. After all the time they've worked together, I went, wow, that's cool. It
Yeah.
was a great line because we had to spray water on Tartable to make it look like he was sweating. And if you
Oh
knew,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
and Paul O'Neill was all over him about that because they got to spray something on you for you to even look like you're sweating. Paul used to get on him about not, overworking himself, so to speak.
Oh, that's so funny. That's such a good story. Thank you for indulging.
Well, I got it. I got it. Laura, what's the hardest part of your job? If you were given advice, I would go. If I ever managed again, I would ask you or somebody to come sit down with the players and talk to them about day-to-day interaction and why I'm not out, or what you're trying, what they need from you, or you need from them, I should say, what you need from them.
I think the hardest part of my job, and this is very specific to me, because I am a shy person and an introvert. It's literally just breaking the ice the first time and just going up to somebody cold and being like, "Hi, my name is Laura Albanese. Do you have a second?" And like for some reason, my mind always goes, "This guy's gonna be like, no, go away, go kill yourself."
Yeah.
And I've had to kind of force myself to do it, even if I'm scared.
Well,
Um, that's tough.
I would put pictures up of everybody they're going to interact with and who they worked with. I would tell them, I'd say, hey, this is this person, this person. They're not your enemy. This and that, whatever. It's part of the job description. But a lot of that, I think, is by the coaches and the manager and the front, the way you portray it to the players.
Yeah.
It's not an evil. It's just a necessary thing that's a conduit to the fans. And once they understand how it's all connected, they seem to embrace it more. Pete's gotten so good at it. When I first got Pete and Lindor, I remember the first conversation I had with Lindor. I said, "Hey, you're too good a guy not to turn this around. You need to. Only thing I need you to do is play shortstop. You don't need to be the spokesman. You don't need to be the police of the locker room. I need you to go play shortstop. That's what works here in New York. Is play better. That's what works here. Play better."
100%. And honestly, like, not to like toot our own horn, we're not as mean as people think we are.
Not as mean as you used to be.
No, not as soon as we used to. Not
All right. Cole, let me tell you, when I first broke in with the Yankees, and they used to come in my office after, there wasn't an interview room. I'll tell you what, there was,
Yeah, that's a crowded room then. You're surrounded.
they were, you haven't lived till you've seen a cameraman hit Joel Sherman with a camera and watch the fight ensue.
Oh, not Joel. Anyone but Joel.
Oh my goodness. You know, the, you had the
Plus,
print media and then you had the electronic media, and the print media wouldn't ask a question because they didn't want to do the work for the electric. Like they go back and it's on the air in 10 minutes, whereas the writer has to have something for the next day that's new and fresh. And I finally understood this. So the writers wouldn't ask the questions for the TV people. And so they all just sit there and stare at each other. I said, well, you want me to ask myself?
Really awkward.
Yeah. You want me to ask myself a question? I just want
Incredible.
it to be over with, but we've solved all the problems. Hey, it was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you
of
so much.
course. Thank you,
Take
Buck.
care. All
Come
right,
back.
talk to you soon, all right?
God bless.
You too.